All right. Hello once again, everyone. We're going to be going over the beginning of your research process to get you started on your recommendation report as well as your newsletter, etc. Remember, the first step is that you'll have an annotated bibliography, and that this annotated bibliography and all the projects that spin off of it and off of this research that we're about to undertake support culture in the workplace. So it's not just about texts, it's not just about arrangement strategies or grammar or whatever it might be, but rather the human behaviors in the workplace or the individual transitions that are sort of social and psychological that one undergoes as you move from, say, college to the workplace or from an old workplace to a new workplace. As we know, writing is always sort of culturally induced, I guess you could think of it as, or socially constructed. And so this is an assignment that lets you explore those social constructions, that culture behind the writing. So what we want to do is just click on this link first. We're going to get a small taste of the research that is out there and the types of things that people talk about. This is the WAC Clearinghouse, stands for Writing Across the Curriculum. But essentially, we're looking here because this first group of books, a number of these will be useful, at least to introducing you to the types of things that writing researchers, people like me, to a great extent, write about when they study writing in the workplace. There is one more good book right here on genre, something we've talked about a bunch, that also contains a lot of good information on both educational writing and workplace writing. But mainly we'll focus on these. Turns out out of the first row here, the first one that's decent is this one right here. So if we click on this, you'll just see a lot of chapters. Some of these chapters have been used in the past by people in the course. Some of them are on education, but some are on workplace writing or other groups of people that you might be interested in writing about. So again, this whole process starts with you thinking about what field am I part of? Do I want to write on? Um, do I want to study in terms of human behaviors? And then finding the right key terms, as is always important in research, to support you finding the sources that you need. So some of these you can see are academically based, and we're looking for workplace writing. So this section on teachers doesn't seem to be quite what we're looking for. But as we go down a little bit, we're getting closer. You can see right here, writing at the borders of school and the world. So we're getting closer. Sponsoring green subjects, that would be environmental writing. It's students' environmental writing. Here's one on political violence. Clearly these are global issues. So if you're doing something with public policy or governmental writing, maybe that would be important. Those might not be the strongest sources. Here's a chapter that I'm familiar with that looks at the difference between teachers' feedback for revision and editors' feedback for revision at a scientific journal. Science teachers versus scientific editors, so to speak. So that type of thing can be pretty useful when you're trying to identify what is different about the workplace from education, right? And so we see hints of Anson Forsberg, right, the sort of novice to expert movement in that article. So again, a lot of these are based upon the transitions from school into the workplace. But as you look down here, the life cycle of a scientific writer, finally now we've gotten to things that have to do with the workplace. Publication practices in U.S. universities. Here's more on science, anybody who's interested in science writing. This one seems to be heavy on science writing. So just take a look through there, and you'll see the various things that people talk about. That one is not our best example. We'll take a look at a few more of these here. We won't need that one. I think this one. If anybody who's interested in Asian cultures, this is a book on Chinese rhetoric and writing and its differences from um, Western writing, I guess we'll say, Eastern versus Western writing. This book should be handy, the blue one here, Writing in Knowledge Societies. Again, in the beginning here, we have some science writing. But here now, when we get here, work in public and professional settings. So here we have one in risk communication, something I've mentioned in class. This is simply communicating public health information or public risks to the public and trying to convince them, persuade them, or simply inform them of whatever it may be. This could be how to not get the flu, this coming flu season. It could be addressing carcinogens, right, cancer-causing agents, how to avoid getting cancer. Could be environmental issues, the quality of water. It could be if there's a toxic spill. So there's any number of things that need to be communicated to the public. And here's a very good article on public dialogue and what the public needs in terms of information, but also what to do when the public has their own rhetorical demands, has their own demands for you. So that's kind of what that article is doing. So anybody that's interested in writing to the public, this might be a useful place to start. If you're not sure what to do after you think about public writing, you might want to think of using risk communication as a keyword. It's a hot topic right now in society and in communication, simply because there's so much work to be done in that area. So if you're not sure what to do for this project, risk communication related to a hobby or interest of yours or to your major would be a really great avenue for this project. And it could be a recommendation report on, say, communicating to the public, or it could be, again, on what novice writers need as they leave college and begin a career in risk communication. So either of those would be great territory for writing a recommendation report. Here's one on environmental writing, another dominant area, the other dominant area really of tech writing. Here are just some other articles you can look through. Things on research environments for back to science writing, it looks like. If you're interested again on student to professional transitions, here's one on doctoral students, so kind of like Anson Forsberg. So you can look through and see this. There are a few others as well, but I'll let you look through these on your own now. Here's one. The red one is on copyright. If you're interested in copyright, people have used this for their sources in the past, including your sample annotated bibliography, looking at the various theories of copyright and how it should function in our society. So you can certainly find good stuff there. Here's one on design. I don't know if this would help anybody's project out, but we spent the first few weeks working on graphic design. So here is a book that would have articles on that if you're looking at particular design problems and recommending solutions. The other one that's good here, Genre in a Changing World, could be pretty good. I believe it has a section on workplace writing. And this one here also has a number of, this is maybe your best source, a number of articles from a variety of fields. Here's one on communication strategies at a bank, which is interesting. Here's one on the medical field. Here's one on software development, so computers and whatnot. Here's just one on management. Oh, Palm Technologies. Okay, there we go. Public policy in New Zealand. So again, this is a good source if you're looking at risk communication, public policy, public writing, communicating with the public, right? So you can see there are a number of things in here. If none of these seem to quite be what you need, that's okay. Take a look through anyway and see what is there. You may be able to come back to this. So that is one good source, the WAC Clearinghouse. The other places to go then, if you can't find anything there, of course, we can go to the school's research engines. I already have us here. This is EBSCO-host. I'm assuming we all know how to get there. You're all fairly advanced in your academic careers. So I've already kind of done a small study here. I just typed in public health or public health writing or public writing and got a lot of hits, but kind of all over the place. So remember, you can always narrow things down by using phrases like public health and risk communication. So now what I can do is simply scroll through, and A, I can see what people are talking about, and B, I might find what my own recommendation report and newsletter might be about. I might find that narrower path I need for this project. And then I might potentially find sources too. So the first few of these seem to be on things in Asia, which is fine if that's what you want to do. But you want to make sure that your sources somehow connect with each other. You shouldn't just have random sources on risk communication. You want it to be toward one type of risk behavior. You can see this one here. This is one I found. This is one of my favorites, I think, so far. It's simply on hand hygiene in Kansas and Missouri petting zoos a couple years ago. So an entire academic article on the way that that zoos try to communicate to people to wash their hands after they touch animals. That's important, right? And here we are looking at academic articles on it. There's a few more down here. You can see the types of things that are communicated. Cancer frequency, public estimates, right? Distorted perception, so that's a problem. you could figure out how to fix it in a recommendation report. Your recommendation would be how to fix these distorted media depictions, right? So that would be interesting. Um, there are others on cancer in here. But if you just sort of scroll through, here's another on cancer, breast cancer, young women. Here's one on the environment, so that's popping up again. There are any number of fields that you might be interested in. You simply need to have good search terms. So, if you're going into the pharmaceutical industry, I would try risk communication and pharmaceuticals, or perhaps just keep it simple in drugs or something like that. If you're going into the publication industry, again, you could look at, I don't know, small bookstores or small publishers or large publishers and how they represent themselves in the media or something like that. If you're thinking about writing about students transitioning into the workplace, then you have a lot of stuff like Anson Forsberg that will exist in the databases here. You simply need to write down the name of the field and maybe novice expert studies or something like this. If you have trouble finding things, simply email me and I'll help you out. Okay, so the other place you can look that might be handy, especially because WAC Clearinghouse and the WSU databases, which we were just in, have fairly specific academic articles. It's probably advisable to just get a book on a more general subject. So we could simply go here, and again, we could type in public health writing, and just try to find a good old-fashioned book in the library, right? Keep in mind you might find a textbook, you might find an edited collection that would have any number of chapters on public health. Some of these don't have writing in necessarily, so you'd have to kind of do a refined search. But here's one that finally came up: Communicating Public Health Information Effectively, a guide for practitioners, and not too old. So that can be a great source as well. Do you have to read the whole thing? I would scan the whole thing and find the chapter or chapters that are important, and I would put those into your annotated bibliography, and that would be good. There are things related to writing here in different ways, so not all of these will be perfect sources, as always. You have to look through the haystack a little bit, right? So, but writing case reports, a how-to, even books like this can be useful. It might not talk about the culture and human behaviors, the transition from being a student to an employee. Instead, it's just talking about texts, the do's and don'ts. Again, don't fall into grammar here or something like that, but you could get a lot of genre knowledge out of stuff like this, or a lot of the audiences and purposes that they write for. Certainly a book like this would cover that. And so this is still a fine source as well for your project. I would have a mixture, maybe one book and a couple articles or something like that. So you need to do this as well. This is a great place to look. And just keep it simple at first, public health writing, and you'll be good, or whatever it is that your topic is. If we go with environmental writing, in fact, we'll maybe call it environmental health writing or something like that. We'll see what happens. Environmental writing would pull up things by like Walt Whitman and poets and nature poets and stuff like that. So I think we want to avoid that with a little bit better search term. And I didn't get too much, so maybe that's not a good search term. You try again, right? But you get the gist of things here. So that is where things begin. Those are your three best sources: WAC Clearinghouse here, looking at EBSCOhost or any of the other article-based search engines, or otherwise it's the library catalog itself. Any of those will be good. I just want to finish real quick then by looking at past recommendation reports. This is the one on the environment that you've already looked at. Here's the sources that they came up with. Keep in mind that in the summer course you don't do an interview, so you do have an interview listed previously on here. You won't have to do that in the summer course. Summer course, you simply need 3 sources. When you write them into your annotated bibliography, they will look like this. But more importantly, you can see where they're coming from. This came from that WAC Clearinghouse book on copyright because it was covering legal issues, and this is a recommendation report on legal issues surrounding environmental recreation waivers, right? So this one had enough to help this student out that she could grab some legal issues, legal writing from that article. And then she found a nice book here on legal liability. And those were her two sources that she needed for her project. Um, Once again, you'll need three. So you can see a nice mix of sources usually makes for a strong project. Here's one that we haven't talked about in previous lectures, but it's on um, problems with writing at the psychological writing of clinical reports at a veterans hospital. This is from a student who had actually done some time as an intern at a veterans hospital and wanted to spend more time with this. Um, as you can see, this student has a variety of sources too. A few things by the same author, the same researcher, Groth Marnott here, who seems to be a researcher of psychological writing. That's always a good research tip. Once you find somebody that researches the thing that you're into, look up their other articles. Most researchers spend their time working on one or two specific things, and that is certainly true here. And a great article, Introduction to the Special Series on Psychological Reports, right? Here's another one on a review of current controversies in a psychology report, right? So those are all good. Here's another one on psychological report writing by someone else. So three articles that were very, very helpful. And when you read this recommendation report as a model for your own recommendation report, you'll see how this knowledge was used. So keep that in mind. You are reading all of these things, give you the assumptions, the foundational knowledge that you need for the recommendation report. The last thing this person includes is something we didn't talk about. She simply went to the Minnesota Department of Human Services homepage and looked at information on writing these reports as well as a supplemental source. So that is, I guess, a fourth area. You could look at government websites and other professional organizational websites to see if they have any information on writing in that field. And they certainly may, right? Okay, one other area you can look at, although you can't always see it, or everything that you need at least, is Google Books. Google Books will usually give you the first 20, 30 pages of a book. And so sometimes it's useful to look at Google Books and research projects because you can read quickly and get yourself in the game from the introduction to a few books. But what I'd like to see is a nice mixture of sources for your three sources. So, that's where you begin reading, that's where you begin thinking, trying to define a problem. In terms of defining a problem, I'll talk more about that in the the recommendation report lecture. But essentially what you need to do is read these articles. It maybe says what's going wrong, it may just say what's going right or how to do something, and you sort of create the problem, you reverse engineer the problem to see what is going wrong potentially or could go wrong in psychological reports. And then these articles could give you all the best answers on how one might go about writing a psychological report or learning how to be a good employee that knows the background knowledge to do such things. So, thank you. That's the beginning of your research. Again, if you need anything, especially in choosing your topic, please shoot me an email and I'll get back to you right away so you can get going on your research. Thanks.